Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Defense One's Outlook 2022. I'm Patrick Tucker, Technology Editor at Defense One, and I'm excited to welcome you to this next session. Before we get started with the session, I have one quick housekeeping note for our audience. On the right hand of the screen, you will see the main stage chat function. This is where you can interact with your fellow attendees. Today, I am joined by Representative Jim Langevin, Rhode Island's 2nd District. Langevin is also the head of the House Armed Services Cyber Innovative Technologies and Information Systems Subcommittee, and that's going to be really key for our discussion here today. And also joining me, Brian Clark, Senior Fellow at the Hudson Institute. Welcome to you both.
Thank you. Great to be with you.
Great to be here, Patrick. So, Congressman, we had to reschedule a couple of times because you had a lot of work to do at the end of the year here, but congratulations are in order. The House has passed the NDAA for next year, and there's still some work to do in the Senate, I guess. But tell us quickly the things that are in the NDAA this year that you are most proud of. Brief overview of what those are.
Yeah, so first of all, thanks for having me. Yeah, it's been a busy early part of the week and a lot of work to do to get the NDAA across the finish line, but great to be able to talk to you about it today. First of all, we voted on the NDAA and got it out of the House last night. So it passed with overwhelming bipartisan support, which I'm pleased about. And now we're waiting for the Senate to do its thing there. So this was a little frustrating this year because there was no formal conference process, and the Senate never passed its own version of the bill. But the House and the Senate negotiated a good agreement, and as I said, passed the House last night. So I'm really pleased, most especially proud that it did pass in a bipartisan manner, but in particular, there was a 25% increase in above the president's budget request in basic and applied research. One of the big, I think, high points of the bill. Beyond that, we continue to focus on workforce development and winning the talent competition with things like national with NSCAI, the National Security Commission on AI recommendations. And then there were provisions like elevating the USD, so Undersecretary for Research and R&D and future capabilities, and also the JROC, and updating the National Defense and S&T strategy workforce department to focus on future capabilities and not legacy systems. So those are some of the highlights. And then finally, also very proud of the work we did in the Warfighter Innovation Transition Fund, which basically is making sure that we're getting more capabilities in cutting-edge technologies into the hands of the warfighter more quickly from things like commercial off-the-shelf technologies, helping small businesses, and increased SBIR and STTR funding continue to improve small business collaboration with the DoD. Just some of the kind of the top lines.
Okay, and sticking with that for a second, because you mentioned increased funding for emerging technology areas like AI and quantum and things like that. That's really great, but there's always been historically this kind of gap between things that are emerging out of Defense Department labs, out of national labs, and actual use on the battlefield deployment. And sometimes it's called the Valley of Death. And that's been sort of characteristic of defense spending in science and technology for a long time. There are provisions, or there were in earlier drafts of the bill, to kind of address that problem specifically. Can you talk a little bit to what they might be in this bill?
So in particular, focusing on small business integration. Small businesses want to work with the DoD, but they often don't know how, and so they're left without things like stable funding. And so on this point, they either go bankrupt, or they turn to the private sector. So in this bill, I'm focused on improving that business relationship with the warfighter that that they desperately need private sector innovation and being able to connect those two and to get the technology deployed more quickly. So my provision in this bill, creating the Warfighter Innovation Transition Program that matches promising small businesses with intermediaries that can guide them through the DoD acquisition process, and it also identifies promising small business projects for accelerated funding and fielding. And it also directs a report on barriers that prevent DoD from adopting and scaling innovative technologies. So I think it's a real bright spot for ensuring innovation breaks through the kind of the cultural barriers or just the inertia that is within the bureaucracy of the DoD and help the can getting the best capabilities into the warfare.
Let me take that and turn to you, Brian, because this problem of the so-called Valley of Death, it's been a big issue for the Defense Department for as long as I've been covering the Defense Department. And top-line leadership from Ash Carter through different officials have talked about it, and they've all tried to come up with little workaround solutions. The Defense Innovation Unit experimental was kind of a workaround to the bureaucratic challenge of fielding advanced technologies faster. The Rapid Development Fund was kind of a workaround. So for a long time, everybody was making workarounds to kind of deal with how slow the acquisition process was particularly around information technology. You just heard the Congressman outline some of the things that are in this year's NDA to attack that specifically. To your mind, what still needs to be done, and how big of a challenge is this still for the Defense Department?
So Patrick, I think one of the challenges with transition are generally, I need a use case that the warfighter is going to employ that is going to take advantage of this technology, so I can get it operationally employed right away. So you can't have a technology with no idea of how you're going to employ it, or else it's going to sit there on the shelf until that comes. I think that this idea of the Warfighter Innovation Fund, the bottom-up efforts that the department has with Project Convergence and Project Overmatch, those are examples of this kind of bottom-up innovation that's going to leverage new technologies and kind of help pull them across the valley of death, because pulling it across by the warfighters is one help. The other challenge is scale, being able to take something and get it up to the numbers that you would need to be able to be operationally relevant. The department still needs to work on that. How do we get some new project that a small business might be transitioning to the point where a prime contractor that has the scale to really build them in the hundreds or thousands is willing to pick it up and run with it. And that's the challenge the department has right now, is getting those prime contractors willing to spend their own IRAD to take something that a small business is almost perfected, and then build out the ability to have that in large enough numbers for it to be useful to the force. And the last thing I would say, though, is that software is a big part of all this. And Congressman Langevin has mentioned this many times, is that so much of the new capability that we're fielding now is based in software, and the hardware is really a commodity product that we're almost buying off the shelf in a lot of cases. So the changes that Congress has made the last couple of years to create a software appropriation and create a software acquisition path, those have been really helpful. And expanding that, which this current NDA is going to do, is really important to being able to transition capabilities. Because right now, a lot of what happens is the new capability sits while we wait to get a contractor to build the software, and then we have to update it through, like we're buying CD-ROMs back in the 90s. That's how we buy software for the most part today. So those are some of the drawbacks, and I think we're making some progress there.
And so building on that, and the question of cyber, Representative, you're head of the subcommittee that looks at cyber from defense perspectives. You had a proposal that recognized private entities whose operations are of high consequence to the nation, and you required them to be in a position to actually defend their networks. And I think that there was a provision on reporting of incidents as they occur. So this would basically accelerate the time by which entities like CISA, government entities, or monitors would be able to respond to a major incident. Did that make it into this version of the bill that passed? Oh.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted now.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. So unfortunately, incident reporting did not make it into the bill. We were working on it right up until the 11th hour. It was kind of, it's on, it's off, it's on, it's off. And unfortunately, it didn't get cleared to be added in the very last minute. We ran out of runway, if you will. But it doesn't mean that it's dead for this, this session of Congress. Early next year, there'll hopefully be some other must-pass bill. Perhaps we'll attach it to if it doesn't pass on its own. But we got a lot of the hurdles were cleared, and I'm optimistic about getting that in the future. It's the thing that's going to give us the some of the best opportunities to appreciate situational awareness, to understand where the threats are coming from. So incident reporting is a top priority. The other one that didn't get in that we worked on it is creating the joint collaborative environment so that the intel community and systemically important critical infrastructure can work together more closely, and having a common tool set by which they can share critical intelligence or put context to the intelligence, so both sides kind of understand in context what the other side is looking at in terms of threat.
Yeah, so I've talked to a few different people about both these provisions, and everybody that I spoke to within the cybersecurity community thought these were really smart and kind of overdue. I think there may have been some industry resistance because it creates new guidelines, things that industry might have to do in terms of threat reporting, but the cybersecurity community was incredibly pleased with it. So Brian, let me turn to you. Given how hard it is to pass even modest new requirements for industry on things like incident threat reporting, is that kind of a big problem for the country in terms of developing a better cybersecurity posture in an environment where we're seeing increased both exfiltration cyber attacks from China and also more cyber physical attacks from Russian entities and from others?
Yeah, absolutely, it does. And so you look at the reporting that came out this week about what Cybercom has been doing in response to ransom attacks. So that's their strategy of a persistent engagement in action, where they are kind of constantly on the move, constantly keeping track of opponents, and actually intervening when they see an attack occurring, and then responding directly and even kind of retaliating at small scales afterwards. If you don't have that rapid reporting from industry, you don't have that ability to persistently engage on their behalf. And there's a whole set of interactions occurring between industry and adversaries that we don't have any visibility on, or if we do have visibility on it, it's much later when the persistent engagement strategy is no longer able to really intervene on the behalf of U.S. industry. So the reporting is really kind of part and parcel of the strategy that we're mounting right now, and we, it's almost like we need to focus on the incident reporting and maybe even back off on some of the other things we put onto industry, like with CMMC. Some of the more onerous restrictions there aren't really helping us that much in the overall competition, but incident reporting really would.
Okay. And speaking of China, the bill adds $500 million for unfunded requirements identified by Indo-Pacific Command for better deterring and countering the growing challenge of China. And it also states that the United States needs to maintain an ability to resist a fait accompli against Taiwan. Those seem like pretty big portions of the bill that deal directly with trying to deter and challenge increasing sort of expansionist language from China. Congressman, talk a little bit about that and what this bill does in terms of increasing the U.S. posture towards China. Does it go far enough?
I think it's a good step in the right direction. In terms of does it go far enough? There's always more that we can do and we should do. But the bottom line is we need to do more in terms of investing in future technologies, moving away from kind of old legacy systems, if you will, and we recognize that China is going to challenge us on the technology front, and we need to do better than what we've been doing. And let me just say that by way of example, we had some great provisions in the bill. They're going to help us to accelerate our R&D strategy and investments. Things like elevating the Undersecretary of Defense for research and engineering to a full voting member of the Joint Requirement Oversight Council. I'm excited about that provision. The JROC, for example, has been a rubber stamp for the services acquisition priorities for decades, and we need an expert there to ground these requirements in technical feasibility and strengthening the national defense science and technology strategy. So, when the technology competition, just by way of example with China, you look at things like electromagnetic spectrum, and so our adversaries have really been investing heavily in electromagnetic spectrum warfare capabilities to dominate this domain, and so we've treated spectrum as an afterthought, and for the last 20 years. So we need to change that. Artificial intelligence, China has a strategy to usurp us in the area of AI, and to be an AI superpower by 2030. We need to improve the way we're looking at AI, and we need to move away from its novelty and gimmickry in DoD and towards an integrated, widely deployed capability. So these are just a couple of the highlights that that I'm proud that we are focusing on in the bill and moving away from the way we used to do things, and looking at the technology that are coming down the pike that we need to lead on and not playing catch up.
Yeah, so sticking with that for a second, this provision that says the U.S. must maintain an ability to resist a fait accompli against Taiwan, that sets a kind of technical and personnel benchmark that seems incredibly relevant, especially to the world in the next few years, as Indo-PACOM has suggested that China could make a play for Taiwan within the next 6 years. They said that in March, the then commander of PACOM did. So let me turn to both of you. How do you think we're positioned right now for that eventuality? Congressman, you spoke about the need to develop new and emerging technologies faster. Where are we right now in terms of that ability to maintain the ability to resist a fait accompli against Taiwan? Both of you. I'll start with you, Brian.
Yeah, Patrick. So one, it was important to think about the fait accompli being an example of a very rapid attack that is successful in the course of hours or days. And really, to be successful at defeating that, all you need to do is delay it enough to where it's no longer a fait accompli. So it sets the bar at a level that is not necessarily ring of steel around Taiwan, but it is going to cause the fight to be hard enough that the Chinese aren't going to get it done in a short period, and it could get protracted and get very ugly. So that bar is not a bar that's unachievable. And so the key to being able to present that challenge to China is creating uncertainty in their mind regarding their ability to pull it off in a very short time period, which is about creating surprise for the Chinese, keeping them kind of on their toes with regard to our posture and the capabilities that we've got. It's about having a good understanding of indications and warnings as to what they might be doing in preparation for that kind of attack. And it is going to involve some dynamic posture moves. So it doesn't necessarily mean we're going to build a wall around Taiwan. It means we need to present the Chinese with the possibility that U.S. ground troops might be on Taiwan, for example, and that could turn an invasion into an insurgency. That would be bad. We're going to have troops in other parts of the first island chain that could contribute, and then we're going to have submarines and other forces that are going to be able to slow that invasion and drag it out. So it's about creating uncertainty through a combination of surprise, intelligence, and persistent engagement. Applying the cybercom strategy broadly across domains. That we could introduce enough uncertainty in the Chinese minds that a fait accompli would not be successful, and that they're going to have to be prepared for a long fight.
Okay, and Congressman, you were just talking a moment ago about electromagnetic spectrum interference. China's fantastic at using electromagnetic spectrum for dramatic effects. They're becoming a world leader in applications in AI. They've developed new hypersonic missiles that everyone's been talking about for the last couple of weeks, but they don't do joint exercising nearly at the same level of the United States, and we still are the world's largest military by far. So where do you think we need to be in the next couple of years, both to resist this fait accompli, but also to change the mind or the trajectory of the Chinese military right now as it expands its view of Taiwan?
So let me just say, I think the way Brian just phrased that is brilliant, and I completely agree with how he articulated. We need to make sure that we are, it undermines China's confidence that they could do a quick, rapid invasion or takeover of Taiwan. I mean, let's face it, why aren't they doing it today? Well, because they know that it would be a hard fight, right? We need to make sure that we are demonstrating our resolve, and that we would make it a hard fight where China would be costly for them to invade and take over Taiwan. The more that is in their mind, the less likely they are likely to take action in there. So we need to make sure that we are investing in those capabilities that are going to make it a hard fight, and that we're making it as costly and as long a fight in their minds, so that hopefully they never try it. So one of the things I'll just talk about things like, we need to, of course, bend the cost curve on a lot of these things in our favor, right? So, right now, we have exquisite, expensive weapon systems that can be very, very capable, but they're limited in number, risk being obsolete with the pace of technological change. China is putting out capable platforms at a fraction of the cost and in dominating numbers. So, we're not going to win a conflict where a Navy ship has to fire, a $1 million missile to bring down a $10,000 drone, much less a swarm. And we need to keep maturing technology like directed energy weapons and railgun to bring the cost advantage back in our favor. So those are some of the things that we can continue to invest in to make sure that we're changing the dynamic on the cost front and the capability front.
And part of that is also, everyone that I talk to has sounded this note when they talk about Taiwan. This deterrence effort is also going to be really grounded in allies. There's a lot of emphasis on Australia, potentially maybe Great Britain, and of course the Taiwanese themselves, that will also have to develop capabilities in order to increase that cost proposition for China in order to deter an invasion. So the Australian military, it's a very advanced military, wonderful satellite capabilities, but interoperability and communications, this is an area that potentially needs new expansion if partner militaries are going to be able to share data at a speed of relevance for military operations. And the Taiwanese military is, well, they're buying F-16s. It's kind of hard to figure that out. So Congressman and Brian, I wonder if you could talk briefly about bolstering the ability of partners to join this deterrence effort. What's the most important thing to do, both for Australia and for Taiwan? I'll go with you, Brian, first.
Yeah, so Australia has a lot of capabilities they already share with the United States. So they have the P-8, they've got the E-18 Growler, they've got the F-18 Super Hornet. So there's already a lot of shared technology between the two countries that results in interoperability. And we already share a lot of the same communication links. We also share a lot of our combat system technology with Australia. So interoperability with Australia is actually not that hard. The challenge, or the thing we have to do, is more exercises where US and Australian forces are doing high-end operations together. So we do Talisman Sabre, which is a regular exercise that operates at the high end, but we need more frequent exercises like that. And then the other thing that we need is the Australians to invest in some capabilities that relate to the undersea domain, which is one domain where we could do a lot more, but currently Australia's capability is pretty limited. So, and I'm not talking just about the submarines, I'm also talking about unmanned undersea vehicles, undersea sensors that might be stationary or relocatable, and the capabilities that would allow them to potentially add more capacity to our ability to create uncertainty for China, that they've got a free run of the Taiwan Strait or the South China Sea. So creating that uncertainty for China is both a US and Australian effort. For Taiwan, there's a lot of people have written about the idea of a porcupine strategy where Taiwan needs to just make itself a harder target. Clearly that's part of it. And part of it might be that we need to do more combined operations with the Taiwanese military to demonstrate to China that they're going to be in for this long slog that could turn into a U.S.-enabled insurgency or a protracted fight on the ground. So it might come down to that. I think that might be where we need to really bolster the resolve of Taiwan.
Yeah, Congressman, when I look at the Taiwanese military, I see on the one hand, there's an urge to develop new asymmetric threats, increase that cost to China, but I also see buying of aircraft that will, up to sit on runways that will be surely targeted by advanced missiles sort of on day one. What can happen to increase that porcupine effect for Taiwan in Congress? Is there an appetite for that?
Well, I think working with Taiwan, making sure that they have advanced defensive weapons capability systems, and I think are really important. And I, again, I agree with Brian. He talked about enhancing and working with our the capabilities and working with our partners and allies around the world. This isn't just China versus the United States, China versus Taiwan. This is the United States and our partners and allies against China, were China to take aggressive military action against Taiwan. So working with the Aussies, the UK, Japan, again, we have friends, partners, and allies around the world that China just doesn't have, and they're not going to come rushing to China's defense if they were to invade Taiwan, for example, versus the international community can push back hard against China. Let me also mention that we also need to not only think of this in military terms, but also in other areas of national power and capability, where we have there are certainly economic costs that could be imposed. Let's remember on the trade front, the amount of food, for example, that China imports from around the world, and how dependent they are in some ways, and being able to meet the needs of their people. So it would upset the balance on that front too, and put them in very vulnerable situations. So we need to tie it, again, all assets of national power. It doesn't only have to be military costs that would be imposed for China to get aggressive.
Yeah. So in the very limited amount of time that we have left, we've had a great discussion about the need for new and emerging technologies, the role that AI and potentially further technological advancements like quantum could play in a great state competition. We've talked a lot about cyber and the need to improve the cyber workforce. But if you look at the language of the NDAA, you still see this push and pull between the old and the new. For instance, there's a provision to keep a bunch of A-10s. And I think a lot of my viewers probably like the A-10, but it's not exactly a relevant platform necessarily against a threat like China. So, Congressman, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that push and pull between legacy and new and emerging technologies, and how you see that evolving over the next few years. How much faster does it need to evolve in us for us to really meet this threat?
Yeah, and that's always the challenge. What is that right balance between using capabilities that we've been working with and comfortable with for years, but then pushing that envelope now to transition away from legacy systems into new capabilities. That's what I mean about we need to further bend the cost curve in our favor. I mean, the A-10, for example, is a great legacy platform, but it's great at helping defend us against mechanized divisions, and so it's great capability of a tank killer. But that's not the war of the future. That's not how it's going to be fought. We need to make sure that we're investing in systems that bend the cost curve in our favor. I talked earlier about it doesn't make any sense to send up a $1 million interceptor missile against a $10,000 drone. We need to invest in those capabilities like directed energy that have a deep magazine, and it's pennies per shot versus millions of dollars per shot, so that we can where our enemies and adversaries have invested in things like short, medium, and long range missiles that are relatively cheap with respect to what it would cost to build and deploy the interceptor missiles to take them out, versus if we can invest in things like railgun or directed energy, which is, again, directed energy is a penny per shot, deep magazine, and you can take down these missiles rapidly and shift from one target to another. Those are the types of things that are going to bend the cost curve in our favor, enhance our capability to protect the fleet, protect the troop, and all of our key assets much more effectively than old legacy defensive systems.
Brian, you have the final thought on this.
Yeah, so a lot of these systems are available today. I think one of the challenges we've had recently is the new technology is not quite ready for prime time. And now we're reaching the point where it is. And it's just a matter of taking the leap and starting to put some of these systems out on ships and aircraft. So for example, we have 300 and 400 kilowatt lasers that can go out and engage potentially missiles and certainly aircraft. We have MQ-9 improved versions that can go do anti-submarine warfare. We've got the MQ-4 that's able to go out and do the ISR mission in place of a lot of the legacy manned aircraft. We've got unmanned undersea and surface vehicles that can go out and disaggregate the force and help us to change to a new way of operating. It's just a matter of making that transition and accepting the fact that things aren't going to be as perfect, or it's not going to be quite the same, but it's going to give us the ability to create a lot more complexity and challenges for China when it comes to something like a fait accompli over Taiwan.
Okay, there you go. Thank you so much. Unfortunately, that is all the time that we have this afternoon. Thank you, Representative Langevin. Thank you, Brian, for joining us. To our audience, please stay tuned. We still have one more great session left today, many more tomorrow. Thank you for tuning in to Defense One's Outlook 2022, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.